chemicals used for sanitation of irrigation water usually are oxidants, such as ozone, hydrogen peroxide, chlorine dioxide, or chlorine. That means these chemicals will react with organic matter, including, of course, our plant pathogens, but they will as well react with other oxidizable substances such as ferrous, manganese, etc. Let's start with the most powerful oxidant, the ozone. Ozone is non-stable toxic gas which has to be dissolved in the water. Due to its instability, it is generated on-site in a strong electrical field and injected immediately into the irrigation water, usually through a bubble diffuser or an injector. Usually the irrigation water is batch-wise treated for a certain time, for example 10 gram ozone per cubic meter for 1 hour. Ozone residues are toxic, not only for the plant, but also for us as well, and therefore they have to be removed, recycled, or decomposed completely. A couple of case studies have shown that ozone is highly efficient against all relevant pathogens. However, only limited scientific information is available for clear and reliable guidelines to apply this technique in horticulture. In Europe, farmers stopped to use this technique due to the very high cost and some technical problems. The next chemical, the hydrogen peroxide, is as well a powerful oxidant and currently not widely used for treatment of irrigation water. But it's coming up in Europe. Due to its instability, it should be stabilized or activated. Various commercial formulations are on the market. Various commercial formulations are on the market. They contain various additives such as organic acids or silver. The pure chemical is not suitable for horticulture. And if you try to buy pure hydrogen peroxide, you might be persecuted as a terrorist trying to construct explosives. At least in Germany, you will need a permit to get pure hydrogen peroxide. To apply hydrogen peroxide, no special delivery systems are necessary. Commercial products are mixed into irrigation lines with the help of simple injection. Unfortunately, there's not much scientifically proved information about efficient and plant-compatible concentrations. However, it seems that about 100 ppm are necessary to kill bacteria and sensitive fungal structures. Higher concentration of about 400 ppm are needed against viruses and nematodes. However, then at such high concentrations, phytotoxicity may occur. Now let's deal with chlorination, a very well-known technique to sanitize drinking water, pool water, and irrigation water as well. Generally, chlorine can be applied as chlorine gas or as solutions of so-called hypochlorites, sodium hypochlorite in particular. All these chlorine chemicals react in water to form rapidly hypochlorous acid, the so-called active or free available chlorine. This is a chlorine form with the highest microbicidal activity. And talking about effective concentrations always has to consider this form of chloride, speaking about active or free chlorine, or in chemical terms, hypochlorous acid. To my knowledge, at least in Europe, the most common chlorine source for horticulture is the liquid sodium hypochlorite. It can easily be injected directly from a commercial stock solution. With solid calcium chloride, it's more difficult. A bypass stream of the irrigation water erodes chlorine tablets, producing a high chlorine concentration, which is finally injected into the main water stream to provide the desired level of active chlorine. Finally, the gaseous chlorine is injected directly from a gas cylinder. However, due to the high health hazard, it needs specific equipment and precautions to prevent toxification of people and environment. Perhaps for these reasons, it is not common in European horticulture. The main problem of chlorinating irrigation water seems to be the correct dosing to achieve a high efficiency without damaging the plant. Obviously, there is no standard concentration applicable to all crops and irrigation systems. To my knowledge, often 2 to 4 ppm are recommended, and they are also effective against bacteria and most of the fungal spores. However, at such levels, activity against viruses, nematodes, and fungal resting spores seems not to be sufficient. Phytotoxic concentrations are quite different, dependent mainly on the crop, the cropping system, and perhaps the irrigation system. For example, with hydroponics, the risk is much higher than with sprinkler irrigation for nursery stock. As with all oxidants, the efficiency of chlorine is reduced by organic material and other oxidizable substances. The amount of inactivated chlorine is called the chlorine demand. Furthermore, high pH and too short exposure time can cause insufficient efficacy. Consequently, especially due to the chlorine demand, a higher concentration has to be provided at the injection site. For example, 5 ppm at the inlet to get 2 ppm at the outlet, which equals, of course, a chlorine demand of 3 ppm. For this reason, the chlorine concentration at the outlet, the point of action, should be monitored because the chlorine demand may vary dependent on the water quality. Chlorination definitely is a low-cost technique suitable for big volumes, and it's easily to integrate into existing irrigation systems. Downsides are the selective efficacy. It is affected by organics and high pH, and has, compared to others, a relatively long reaction time. There is, of course, a risk of plant damage, and there's also a certain risk of toxic byproducts. And therefore, due to its downsides, chlorination is not widely used for disinfecting recycled irrigation water in Europe, at least in the northern and western parts, Germany and the Netherlands in particular. In my opinion, the next chemical, the chlorine dioxide, is more suitable for horticulture than chlorine. Chlorine dioxide is not chlorine. It does not form hypochlorous acid. It is a water-soluble gas and a strong oxidant, more comparable to hydrogen peroxide and ozone than to chlorine. The effective concentration is about 1 ppm or lower against bacteria and fungal spores, except resting spores or sclerosion. It does not work against viruses, nematodes, and so forth. In contrast to chlorine, very short reaction times are necessary. That is a big advantage, as well as that chlorine dioxide is not affected by high pH. Due to the problems with storage and transport, it is usually produced on site and directly injected into the irrigation lines. chlorine dioxide basically can be generated in various ways. However, for horticultural use, the so-called acid chloride reaction seems to be the standard. Two solutions, diluted sodium chloride and hydrochloric acid, are mixed together, producing chlorine dioxide. 1 liter diluted base and 1 liter diluted acid generate about 40 grams of chlorine dioxide. And that is sufficient to treat 10 to 40 cubic meter of irrigation water. This picture here on the right side shows a chlorine dioxide generator and injector used in practice. Very important are two very precisely working dosing pumps. The pump the acid and the base out of the canisters or barrels into a reactor to generate the chlorine gas, which is dissolved in water. The reactor is sealed, so no harmful gas can leak out and threaten man or plant. From the reactor, the highly concentrated chlorine dioxide solution is simultaneously injected into the bypassing water. And of course, the concentration can be adjusted on the control panel. With the next slide, I would like to demonstrate two important differences between chlorine and chlorine dioxide. This example is about the efficacy of chlorine and chlorine dioxide against Phytophthora cinnamomum. The two graphs show what concentration is necessary, here the concentration, is necessary to kill the chlamydospores of Phytophthora at a certain pH or a certain time of exposure. First, the left graph showing the influence of the pH. Yellow columns are for chlorine and the red ones for chlorine dioxide. As demonstrated by the yellow columns, 4 ppm were necessary to kill Phytophthora at a pH of 5.5. However, 10 ppm are necessary at a pH of 8.5. In contrast, chlorine dioxide, the red columns, is fully effective at 1 ppm at all 3 levels of the pH. So the pH doesn't influence the effectivity of chlorine dioxide. Now this graph on the right side, you see here the time of exposure and again the concentration necessary to kill Phytophthora, and you see on the yellow columns that with increasing exposure time, the necessary concentration will decrease. I will look at the 2-minute exposure time. 8 ppm, that is a lot, are necessary to kill Phytophthora. And again, chlorine dioxide is independent of the time. Already at the shortest exposure time, only 1 ppm is necessary to kill Phytophthora. So we can conclude that the efficiency of chlorine dioxide is independent of pH and contact time, in contrast to chlorine. In principle, the pros and cons of chlorine dioxide are very similar to those of chlorine. Similar to chlorination, we can say it's a low-cost technique, even if it is a little bit more expensive than the standard chlorination. It can easily be integrated into an existing irrigation system. It is particularly suitable for big water volumes, and it is independent of pH and time. Like chlorine, the good efficacy is restricted to bacteria and sensitive fungal spores. All oxidizable material will reduce the concentration of active chlorine dioxide, producing a chlorine dioxide demand similar to chlorine. Therefore, at the inlet, a higher concentration is necessary than the target concentration at the outlet. The same as I said with chlorine. but other concentrations. Here, for example, 1.5 ppm at the inlet to get at least 0.5 ppm at the outlet. The last chemical I would like to talk about actually is not an oxidant and no disinfectant at all. As you know, copper usually is used as a fungicidal or bactericidal spray. However, using a specific technique, the ionization, it also can be used for water treatment. For this purpose, copper or silver electrodes are submerged into a water stream. The electric current between the electrodes displaces positively charged ions from the anode. The water stream carries away these microbicidal ions. The amount or concentration depends on the voltage and the electric conductivity of the treated water. Here are some examples how it looks like in practice. Most common is the so-called aqua hort ionizator, consisting of PVC pipes with copper electrode bars inside and of course a control panel. Very important, the aqua hort system is, to my knowledge, the only one able automatically adjusting the copper concentration at varying water flow or at varying electric conductivity. This is really a very important point for practical use in horticulture, where, of course, we have varying EC values, for example. Other systems here, for example, from Inotec, are more compact, containing copper or silver plate electrodes or even alloys of both metals in a flow cell chamber. But they don't have the automatic regulation of the concentration at varying EC values, which, from my point of view, is a crucial downside. Recently, aqua hort brought a more compact unit on the market, the tank system. Furthermore, big copper plates can be fixed on a raft for usage in large water reservoirs, mainly to control algae growth. In contrast to all of the oxidants, the metallic ions need very long reaction times. This graph demonstrates that even at high concentrations of 2 to 4 ppm, the red and the yellow columns, several hours, even the whole day, are necessary to kill plant pathogenic bacteria. However, in practice, usually continuous application enables a good control in nursery stocks or pot plant production and so forth. Here an example with turbera in an ebb and flow system. Already at very low concentrations of only 0.28 ppm copper, the red columns, a remarkable decrease of dead plants could be achieved compared to 0.07 ppm, which is just nothing. However, in this experiment, using specific iron chelates, the copper activity was inactivated. But I have to say it depends precisely on the very low concentration. We in our lab did experiments usually with concentration of higher than 1 ppm. In our experiments, using standard fertilizers with chelates, we never observed such an inactivating effect. Definitely, ionization is as well a low-cost technique. It is very easy to install, to handle, and to maintain. There are very small units available as well as units for big water volumes. However, downsides are still the selective efficacy, and the long reaction times. There are a lot of practical reports from the provider. However, still there is only limited scientific proof of the efficiency under practical conditions. And it is unclear what are the limits with respect to the phytotoxicity, especially on the long-term application in recirculating systems.